Welcome to Next Generation Introduces, a series of films where we'll introduce a number of different job roles in the theatre. The actors you see on stage in a production are part of a much bigger team of creative people who all have a part to play in making theatre happen. The RSC's Next Generation initiative is designed to support the development of young people interested in pursuing a career in the theatre, and we hope these short films are a useful guide to some of the different jobs that exist, what they do, and highlight some of the different routes into the profession. In this film, Next Generation introduces the set and costume designer. The set is what we call all the physical elements that make up the world on stage. Using elements like scenery, structures or furniture, it may look realistic or it may be more abstract in its design and construction. The costumes are what the characters wear on stage. It's the designer's job to work with the director to imagine the world in which the play takes place. Taking clues from the script, the director and the designer will make decisions about the time, place and atmosphere of the story. The designer will then take these ideas and design the set and costumes that will provide the audience with a visual context for the play. Let's take a look at the set design first. Some plays are very specific in their setting. For example, the story may take place in a particular town or country or at a particular period of time. And some plays, including Shakespeare's plays, are a little more open to interpretation. For example, most of the action in Shakespeare's play A Midsummer Night's Dream takes place in the wood outside Athens. But different designers have used the set design to create their own very different interpretations. Some created a very realistic wood, while others find different ways to create this magical location. After creating the initial concept drawings, the designer creates what's called a white card model. This is a simple 3D model of all the physical elements of the set. The designer presents their ideas to the other creative team, where they can all discuss the practicalities. The next stage is for the designer to make a more detailed final model. This shows all the detail needed to make or buy each element of the set. These models are usually built to a 1:25 scale, which means the model is exactly 25 times smaller than the real thing. From this scale model, accurate measurements can be taken and the designer can be sure that when it is built, it will fit the theatre perfectly. Once the set is built, the set is brought into the theatre space, and this is called the get-in, and the designer is present to make any final adjustments. A similar process happens for the designing of the costumes. Sometimes a separate designer might be employed to look solely at the costume designs. The designer will create costume designs for each character, and sometimes a character will require several different costumes throughout the play. It's the designer's job to make sure that the style of costumes works with the aesthetic created with the set. An audience can get a lot of information about a character before they even speak, just from what they are wearing. For example, their age, their social status or wealth, their cultural background or religion too might be apparent from the costumes they wear. A designer will first create a mood board which outlines the initial ideas for discussion with the director and other team members. Following this, the designer will create a set of costume designs for each character. These will be shared with the actors in rehearsal and used as a guide either to make or buy the costumes. To find out a little bit more about what's needed to become a designer, I spoke to Anisha Fields, a brilliant designer, about her work.
Hello, I'm Anisha Fields. I'm a set and costume designer, and I'm going to be answering some of the questions that Robin has sent me from you guys today. So first up, I've got a question from Lanny in year 12. In your opinion, what is the best part of the job? Really, there is loads to love about it. It is a job that constantly keeps you on your toes, and I sort of love that about it. Because it's such a problem-solving type job, you are constantly being asked to use your brain in different ways. So that might be you go to a space and it's totally different to the spaces you're used to working in, or it might be that the script is particularly challenging and it's asking you to move from place to place really quickly, or it could be that you're working with fewer cast members than you need to fulfill the needs of the script, or it could be that you're devising and not using a script at all. It just constantly means you need to reimagine the way that you both work and how you process, how you go through that process basically. And so I love that about the job, that it really makes you think individually on each different project, so it really keeps you the cogs whirring. In terms of how that question translates in terms of what's my favourite part of the job and my favourite part of the process, I would have to say it's probably really close to the beginning, when you're just chucking loads of ideas around with a director or lighting designer or sound designer, and you're kind of thinking really big and wild and free before it comes to that problem solving. So although I love that you are challenged in that way, really just thinking creatively and feeling inspired by a script or a subject matter is a really great part of the job. I hope that answers that question. Okay, I've got a question here from Macy in year 9, which is, what is the hardest thing about your job? So I would say the hardest thing about my job is balancing lots of different projects at the same time. So most set and costume designers are freelance, which means that you are master of your own time, which means you tend to work a lot because you want to give every project you've got on your plate the best you can. Sadly, it's very rare for us to just have one project on our plates at the same time. So really juggling everything that a different project needs, like making sure you're in as many places as once, whilst providing each individual project what it needs from you is the hardest part. Okay, I've got a question from Ava here in year 9, which is, when designing, how much time is spent on research? So when I'm designing, the amount of time I spend on research really varies from project to project. I always would like to spend more time researching. It's a really great part of the process, but obviously you're restricted by usually the time you've got to do the entire project. And I would also say it does vary. It varies from project to project. So you might find that there's a particular show that requires a lot of very detailed research on the subject matter. Like say if you're doing something set in a particular period and it was very detailed, you would probably spend a long time researching all the kind of details of the costume in the set. For example, if say it was really naturalistic and it had loads of objects in it, and that process would continue sort of throughout. So you might at the very beginning research loads and loads of images to get started on your design, and then when it comes to sort of picking the props a bit later on, you'll have to do more and more research then. So in answer to your question, sorry it's a bit rambling, I think it's hard to say because it's so intrinsic to the process all the way along. You never get enough time to research, I would say, or you'd always like to spend longer researching. But it is a very important part of the process. Okay, so I've got a question here from Zara in year 12. What qualifications do you need to be a set and costume designer? So to be a set and costume designer, most people would have a degree in theatre design or performance design or something similar. I think the reason for that is that the job does involve quite a lot of hard skills. Like you need to be able to do technical drawings, you need to be able to use certain types of software, you need to be able to model make to a fairly high standard, and also a degree usually will provide practical experience, which is quite hard to gain outside of that context. So you'd find that most people who do the job will have a degree or a postgrad degree. That said, it is possible to do without. No one has ever asked me for my certification, for example. I have worked with people who've done something like fine art and then gained the skills through short courses. So it is possible to do that way. It probably takes a little bit longer. In terms of how you get to that point, people who train in theatre design tend to come from a whole range of backgrounds. You find some things that are really common, like often you'll find people who've done architecture degrees, or they've done an art foundation or a literature degree. But But I would advise getting a degree in the subject if you can, if it's something that you want to do.
As a final question, I asked Anisha, what piece of advice would you give a young person who might be considering becoming a designer?
My advice to anyone wanting to be a set and costume designer, first one would be prepared to work hard. It is a lot of long hours, and some of those hours are great, some of them are really tedious, but overall it's a really rewarding career path if you are prepared to work hard, and a really fun and varied job to have. Secondly would be don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's a kind of fundamental part of the job. I think you will definitely make mistakes along the way, and if you're not making a few blunders, you're probably not being bold enough. And my last piece of advice would be go and see and experience as much as you possibly can. So go and see as much theatre as you can, go to exhibitions, watch films, go for walks, go to the football, go to the park, look at the buildings around you. I think you can bring all of that into your work, and I think you are always the richer for it.
I hope that's given you an insight into the role of the designer. If you'd like further information about the RSC's Next Generation programme, please visit the website. You'll also find links to the other resources about careers in the theatre, and also links to our network of theatre partners who may be able to support you with more local opportunities. My thanks to Anisha Fields and to the students from St Mary's College in Hull and Ormiston Sudbury Academy in Suffolk who sent in their brilliant questions.